Hey, and welcome to another episode of Creative Leaders Unplugged, brought to you by Future Skills Academy. I'm Morgan, here with Arna, and today we talk to Adam Lawrence. Yeah,
Yes,
facilitator, aficionado,
yes.
uh, global service jam.
Yeah, global surfer jam. Very important. It's coming back, folks. It's coming back. So sign up. It's important. It's been important at the start of the whole service design movement. And we want it back. Uh, and because it is really cool to be part of that movement and that jam and the community and the energy. Yeah. So anyway, Adam is a sort of he's really a hero of mine. Someone who,
Yeah.
yeah, someone who's been very inspirational. Set an example and kind of a standard in facilitation and being a facilitator.
Mhm.
So which really has had a big impact on me and many other people. So yeah, so really cool to have him on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that he'd written the book. This is, I just want to make sure I get the title of the book right. The title of the
Service
book is
design doing.
This is Service Design Doing, yes. And of course, he had written that, and so I anticipated, yeah, in my mind, right? I have an idea of how the conversation might go, and it went a different way, which I thought was also really beautiful and refreshing because in the end, he talks about the importance of facilitation and kind of where he feels the future of things is going. And I think how he ends with his final conclusion is just beautiful. And I think it's something that a lot of people, whether they're interested in service design or just design in general or just being creative, I think it's really applicable advice that we should all really think about it, especially as we're starting to move into a world where more non-human voices are going to be in the arena as well.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so I know just yeah. So just go and listen to the conversation, and do let us know, what you think. And yeah, I don't know. I could have talked to Adam for many more hours, but I'm really happy with this interview. So yeah,
Yeah, hope you guys also enjoy.
I grew up in the UK, but most of my life in Germany. I am emotionally German, I guess. Yeah, a pro-European person. Um, my work has taken me, without describing my job now, it's taken me from psychology through theater and working with large organizations. So it's kind of a mixture of all those things. I'm really into play outside of work, so and in work as well sometimes. But I do medieval, not reenactment, but recreation we call it. So at the weekend, you'll often find me dressed up and hitting my friends with sticks, which is really fun all over the world. Um, I really enjoy nature. I studied zoology, and I love being outside, and especially enjoy being around animals.
so that's if that doesn't confuse you, Morgan,
I
then
know my brain is shooting off in so many
you're
different
like, I
directions, right?
went I went all the way there, and then I went all the way there, and then I
Yeah.
went all the way to the other side, and we're like, what?
Been
So what?
some weird jumps in there, but I didn't. Looking
Oh,
back, I didn't really see them as jumps at the time. I thought
mhm.
they were, but then looking back on it, I saw the continuity between these different things.
What is the continuity between those things?
The continuity between them is humans collaborating to try and make other humans feel a certain way. So that could be in psychology, where it might be the collaboration between a therapist and a therapy, talking and using words and storytelling to make someone feel maybe better or to cope with something.
Mhm.
Um, in I worked in the motorcycle industry, so back there it was about coordinating factories and designers and sales organizations to give somebody a conglomeration of steel and plastic and glass and gasoline, which they would really enjoy uh, riding down the road very fast, or which would get them to work reliably in the mornings, or some combination of those. So they feel happy about the freedom that gave them and the possibilities that gave them. And in theater, it's very, very direct. You have these group of people. Some of them are consider themselves artists, some of them are technicians, some of them are business folks, some are looking after those people. But together they put innovation on stage in budget every 6 to 8 weeks. And they've been doing that for 2,500 years in the West, longer in the East. Yeah, so it's a really, really interesting novelty factory, innovation factory, story factory, whatever you want to call these things. All those things are part of that. Might be using old plays, but do them in new ways each time and so on. So that's really, really interesting. And between all of those, there's this idea of human beings working together with other human beings and material things to create something which somebody else values.
How does zoology fit into the picture?
Well,
Because like I wanted to be a dolphin trainer when I was a little girl.
yeah, I did a double degree back in the day, just a bachelor of zoology and psychology. So I specialized in monkey thinking. So it's nice to be here today with
This
you
is
folks.
brilliant.
Yeah, and I guess today I'm most known for my work in facilitation, and one of the ways that I seem to be able to engage people and help them to do good work is by constantly reminding myself, we are monkeys here. What do monkeys need right now?
Mm.
And
That explains a lot.
it might include social time. It might include physical needs. It might include seeing things change, visual stimulation, a break, whatever it is, food, something to climb on. All these things are important.
Absolutely. So, but so my question was sort of if you, because now you're looking back and you're seeing all these connections and it makes sense, sort of. But when you were starting out, without really having the benefit of being able to look back, where did that all come from? I mean, was it something inside your DNA, or I mean, why did you do all these things and other people didn't?
I'm not really sure. I mean, I was always with the zoology and psychology. I always just loved David Attenborough on television. These sort of great BBC and Anglia television documentaries about animals. And that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be on TV talking about animals, and that's a really hard job to get. So I failed to get that one. But I did have the degree then, and part of that was psychology. Psychology to marketing is not a very long step, So I moved into motorcycles, and this was back in the day when marketing was not just promotion; it was all the P's, man. It was deciding what product do we make and so on. It's in the 80s still, and I thought the big jump was moving from motorcycle industry into theater. I thought that was a big step at the time, but then some years later, when I started blogging in the mid 2000s, I guess when blogs were big, I was writing about theatricality that I saw in everyday business, in commercial life, and obvious stuff, like lighting and costume and so on, but also less obvious stuff like dramatic arcs and timing and role and relative status and story and all this kind of thing. And when I started looking at it through that lens, then I started to understand the connections between what I'm doing before. I mean, theater is, in bad Greek, it's the seeing place. It's the place where we see things. Chekhov, I think, said a play is a whole life in 1 hour. And Oscar Wilde said he knows no other way of more genuinely making a human being understand how it is to be another human being than through theater. So I think there's a lot of truth that gets revealed when you're working in theater, and that, I think, that lens was the one that let me connect all these things together, and it's still a lens I use in my work almost entirely.
Yeah, I know there's also and I actually do want to go a little back to where when did you decided to become German and those things, but I just because you're talking about the theater. There's this whole thing around innovation theater, and I was thinking about that recently. That actually, because I'm doing these change agent programs and stuff like that, and that allows basically people get appointed to be a change agent, and then I started realizing that actually that's a terrible thing to be called sometimes, because there's like, you are a change agent, and people go like, ooh,
like you.
That's how I was like, oh, are you trying to get rid of me,
This up.
or yeah, what's the catch, right?
Mm,
Because it's dangerous. And so anyway, we were doing these programs, and I kind of do a sort of a leadership program, and part of that is really getting to, you have to get to know yourself, your own boundaries, and we do, through origin stories, and people really need to open up, because otherwise you don't understand who you are, what your limitations are, or why you respond in a certain
mm,
way to a group, et cetera, et cetera. So we ask people to really open up and be vulnerable, because if you are not vulnerable as a leader, how can anyone else be, et cetera,
mm,
et cetera. It's all kind of logical in a way if you think about it, but then there's this limit where people are like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not going to be that vulnerable,
mm,
because I
mm,
don't really, really trust the
mm,
organization I work for. I
mm.
don't really trust it. It's not a real thing. It is acting. It is, so there is a business theater going on as well. Yes, you are in a role, and people, in different contexts, people behave differently. So in a way, there is always a bit of theater
Yeah,
there.
and this is kind of the theater maker inside me is kind of squirming right now, because this is the common understanding of theater, yeah, that it is a pretense, that it's a facade, and people who work in theater, we reject that. So I understand when I use the word innovation theater, I mean it in the same way. I mean you're faking it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But really good theater is never fake. It's more true than real life. Yeah, I
Mm.
like to make a comparison. One of my favorite, I think probably my favorite actor is also Anthony Hopkins, and he's most famous for his role in The Silence of the Lambs. Yeah, and the reason he is so terrifying as Hannibal Lecter is he could have been that if he just switched off a couple of his own moral safety fuses. Yeah, he has the capacity to be that because we all do. When a good actor, they reveal sides of themselves they don't normally show. Willem Dafoe says the same thing. I'm a cabinet, and I open different drawers each time and show you what's in them, but they're all drawers within me. They're ones I normally keep closed, and that's terrifying. Like mid-century Godzilla movies with a human being in a rubber suit. Yeah, he's knocking over Tokyo, but it's not scary because it's not real. Yeah, it's obviously a person in a rubber suit. And even the CGI ones you see today, amazing as they are, they're not scary in that way. What's scary is Hannibal Lecter, which is Sir Anthony Hopkins showing another side of himself. So when we talk about theater, we see it as the seeing place, I said it before, as an arena in which we can show truth
Yeah.
and
So
not to pretend to be something else.
yeah, but I think we're talking about the same thing. So when you talk about innovation theater, that's
Mm.
I get that. That's sort of
Yeah,
like
that's the facade. That's the
that's a
fake.
facade.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But when I mean what I mean with this business theater is that it's real. You're there.
Mm,
You're the real
mm,
person, but you
mm.
don't show that side of
Yeah,
yourself
exactly. You
that
decide
is
which
there
sides to
too,
show. Yeah.
right? Because you're like, that's not where I'm going. I'm showing this part of me
Mm,
because this
mm.
belongs, because this is how I survive. This is how my brain tells me I'm going to survive in this context, in this
Yeah.
system. I have to behave in this certain way. And then I come in, or someone else comes in and says, well, if you really, really want to kind of change, you have to open up that little door too. And people go
Yeah.
like, no, I'm not going to open that
Exactly.
door because that's dangerous, because I don't really, really trust. So because to me, play and theater and I think I think that's part of human. I don't know if anybody or everyone realizes that, or feels it in the same way, but you always play a certain part within a certain
Yeah.
context.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's fake,
That's
but
it.
to your
That's it.
point,
That's the difference. Yeah. It's the difference between what I'm choosing to show and when I pretend to be a thing that I'm not. Yeah. And most of us, we go into business context, for example, and we have some of those drawers of the cabinet open and we keep some of them are closed because they're for our private lives or even our secret lives that we might have. Yeah. And that's fine. Somebody can, I think, choose a part of themselves to show or to not show and still be
Mhm.
genuine. I think there are benefits to exploring other things that we could open, which are not normally open, to be more vulnerable and so on. That was not in, go back 30, 40 years and say someone should be vulnerable in the office. That was just ridiculous. Yeah. Mad
Exactly.
Men and all the rest of it in the 80s, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
At the same time, if I pretend I have a drawer open, which is not really part of me, people smell that. People really, really smell in authenticity very, very
Exactly.
quickly. But what I can do maybe is I can stretch towards things. I can learn to do things. And what you're talking about here, that feeling of hesitancy to show more of myself, to be more of a whole person, which would be, I think, really ideal if we could be our whole selves all the time. We in theatre really obsess about that, and we call that the concept of safe space. And the safe space is a situation in which it's okay for me to be myself, and it's okay for me to fail. And in fact, failure is an expected part of the process. And that's really the opposite of the situation in most organizations, that failure is expected to be part of the process and is seen as valuable. And we do that in theatre by having physical surroundings in which we do rehearsals, which are different from the rest of the theatre. And they bring up a whole mindset in us of failure. It's these rehearsal rooms, these black curtains and black painted floorboards and terrible coffee and stuff like this. And in those, we're happy to do things that we wouldn't do otherwise, to scream and fall over and take our clothes off and stuff. And we decide what leaves that. Yeah, and that's not a situation that you have in most organizations.
Definitely not. And I'm really curious because you said that you're emotionally German, and to have this like this safe space, and I can hear you talk about so many of the parallels, of course, between organizations and working in these spaces and opening up true parts of ourselves. But was theater something like that you were immediately drawn to, or did it, like, have you always been interested in this aspect of tapping into different versions? Because of course I don't know what it means to be German or emotionally German. I have a slight vague idea in my head, but when I think of the German stereotypes, of course, I think of a country that waits to cross the road unless the light is green, even if there's no cars at all.
I'm not very good at that one yet. I'm working on that one still.
Yeah. So how was that something that was also encouraged in your like upbringing? Like, okay, yeah, just experiment and play around, and you have this safe space to dress up and hit your friends with sticks? Or was this something that you came to love? And
I think it was. I did the usual school theatre type stuff, that everybody does, and I was okay at it. But my family, my parents would always be organizing, costume parties and stuff like that, and events in the village and things, so there was that kind of playfulness to getting together, which I thought was really interesting. I'm showing my nerd colors here. I used to do tabletop role playing games, Dungeons and Dragons type things, and that's what got me into the medieval stuff. Actually, was doing that first. But it's that playing together and saying, we're going to play together without a board. We're going to play together without lines on the floor which tell us where the game's over. And I think that's been a thread through my life. That the people who are playing the game, we hold the space. And we decide where the space ends rather than having that imposed by the Monopoly board or the tennis court or whatever it was. I always found those kind of games much less interesting than the ones which are developed and, if you like, evolved while they're being played by the players. And whether that's a harvest breakfast on the village green and let's see what happens. We'll put on funny hats and see what happens. That kind of thing, up to these massive sort of medieval things I take part in now. There's all that idea of a sort of a blurring edge to it. And that's quite interesting too, because generally when people define something like a game, they say it has a boundary.
Yeah.
The football works because there's a line around the field, and that's Monopoly works because you don't just take 5 dice at once. You always have the fixed number of dice and things like this. So maybe that's a link between these things.
Yeah. That's and I'm thinking, because I studied play a bit, and games are not always play.
No.
In the way that I think about play and I think about games, but of course there can be some games that are play, but they're not always mutually exclusive. And so what you're saying about boundaries is then also when we can start to push.
Sorry, my brain went, what? Well, games are not always play. Yeah, explain.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way that I learned about play is that you're just doing something just to do it, not for a desired outcome or goal. So if you play a tennis match and say, I'm playing this tennis match to win, you're actively moving your body, and yes, you're playing tennis, but you're not necessarily playing because you're so fixed on winning the game.
Which is especially true when it becomes professionals, for example. doing this
Yeah.
as their job and for money and so on. I think it's not a clear definition or demarcation between those things, because
Yeah.
there are lots of things going on at this. If I'm playing a board game with my family, I'm still kind of trying to win, but the other object is to have fun together and to spend time together and laugh and stuff like this. So I think there's lots of things going on at different levels, and it's a thing to talk about a lot. Which a very interesting thing here is I have the word play in my company. We're called Work Play Experience, yeah, but I don't use the word very much at work, although I'm doing often quite playful things, and I'm having a rubber chicken in my pocket nearly all the time and stuff like this. That's not what I lead with. We lead with. I learned this from Anna actually. In our book, he talks about doing the first meetings maybe with a suit on, and then the tie comes off, and then the jacket comes off, and then you get more and more sort of relaxed with people. And very much in the same way, when I work with organizations, I'm wearing a suit nearly all the time, and we talk science and so on before we do things which somebody else might see as playful. We often don't call them even play or a game. We might say, let's do some brain training, yeah, or let's make a simulation.
Oh
We use
yeah,
these
because
words.
you were the one saying, don't say role play, but
Yeah, I
show,
do not.
don't tell.
Yeah, I don't
Right.
like the word role play. Also, because I know more than one person who has written in their employment contract, this is not a joke, they have written in their employment contract they will not be required to do role play because they've been so hurt by it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I use theatrical rehearsal methods in my work nearly all the time, but I don't use that word role play. I'm not asking you to play a role, I'm asking you to simulate a situation. Try this,
Yeah.
try it
And
that way.
iterate. So I
And iterate,
obviously,
exactly.
yeah, I know because I think I mean, we've met many times, and I kind of remember when it was exactly, but I do remember this with the chicken and the iteration, and just do it over and over and over again.
Exactly.
So like you were stopping people when they halfway when they were showing and not telling, and you were like, no, wait, go back and do it again, because so it feels like you're rehearsing for theater, for a
Yeah.
play,
Yeah.
and so until it fits, until it feels natural, until it feels like, yeah, this is how we want to enter there. No, that's weird. And then the chicken is a doorbell, the chicken is a phone, the chicken is I don't know. So
Exactly.
the chicken got really famous as well, by the way. So
Yes, it has. I've sort of the first chicken I ever had. This is weird. I was at a medieval event in the middle of the forest, and two cars drove up with a bunch of American soldiers in them, and they got out and they gave me a rubber chicken, and some gaffer tape or duct tape, as you call it, and drove away again. There's a kind of a story behind that, but that was a very surreal moment, and there are lots of reasons I have rubber chickens around me all the time. Perhaps the let's say the logical one is that the model of mindset, which I like from my very, very ancient psychology degree, is that mindsets are literally sets of stimulus response pairs. Yeah. So if a certain thing happens, I will respond this way to it nearly all the time in that mindset. If I have a different mindset, then I respond to it differently. So I might have a professional mindset or a family mindset, things like this, and I respond to different things different ways. And it seems that those mindsets are very strongly triggered by the physical context that I'm in. Yeah. So if the three of us are standing wearing our fancy suits and our killer shoes, standing around a big mahogany table in the boardroom, with a view out over Manhattan or something, and Morgan says to me, Adam, that wasn't the best idea I've heard this year. That's fighting talk. That's going to be that's an offer of conflict. Yeah, but the same people could be down at some bar after there with a different kind of mahogany table now. One that's got beer mats on it and maybe a few pumps, and they've got some glasses in front of them, and they've loosened off their ties. And now Morgan can say, Adam, you're an idiot today, and we'll laugh about it. The same people in a different context. So I think it's really, really funny when really, really interesting when that big boardroom table has a rubber chicken on it.
Yeah.
Because what's the appropriate mindset now? Yeah. What is the appropriate mindset when there's yeah, let's say a rubber chicken on the boardroom table, or maybe there's a some kind of scientific device in the nightclub. Yeah, what does this do? It's very, very interesting stuff.
Yeah, because you're basically messing with people's brains, basically, because your brain is trying to figure out what the game is and what the rules are and how to act within that, within that context.
Very
and how
nice.
to, and then you go like, here's a robot, and the brain goes like, oh,
Not
Yeah.
I don't
Very
know this
nice.
game.
I don't understand how to survive this situation.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that means that they, it can also mean that, because, well, here's the thing. So you are also someone who is, people will allow you to do that as well. I don't think everyone who brings that rubber chicken will have the same. In fact, that there's also this, because you are very comfortable with doing that. And I remembered doing it because I actually, when I started out with, in service design and facilitation specifically, which I didn't really know what that was. I just it happened. I was like, oh, what am I doing? What is this? I'm slightly autistic. I'm not. I don't really like groups of people. I do all the time, but still, I don't really like. And I'm not someone who plays. I like to kind of play games in the groups and stuff like that. That's not really who I am. So, but I remember really well. We did a game somewhere in London. We had this totally it's supposed to be a party. I don't know, misfired or something. Something went wrong. But we had a group of people in a park in London, and you did this, whatever. We're in a circle, and we were doing this game of passing an invisible ball or something. Anyway,
sounds like me.
Yeah. Well, it was sort of, and I realized, I realized that what the strength was of you. Or any really good facilitator, in this case, I realized what your strength was and is that I wanted to do it right for you. I was going to participate because I felt that you just asked us to do stuff and we were going to do it. There's no way I was going to not do it. It was like, because it was like, I need to, because Adam is like, it's about presence. It's about this totally comfortable. It's like, of course we're going to do this. It's logical. And like, there's no getting away from it. So then you get into it. And then, that when you get into it, and then it becomes fun and you become comfortable because everyone's into it. And so this idea of creating that space, because that's what you do, you create this space where it's actually kind of uncomfortable, really, because you're like, what's going to happen? How silly is this going to be? Is this something I want? Is everyone going to do it? And then all of a sudden it's there and you're like, oh, this is fun. It's an amazing switch. So there's rubber chicken on the tail. If you have it, it's also about having a presence that you are able to do this instead of really freaking people out, or that they're going to freeze or or flee or whatever response they have to a dangerous situation.
Thank you. I've got to be humble here and say not everyone likes to do it, and that's fine, and one of my favorites inspirations is a game designer called Tyagi, and he points out that there are two, some people learn by making fools of themselves, others learn by watching others make fools of themselves, and both of those are legitimate. And if I often put that up on a screen before I do this kind of stuff, so if somebody wants to just hang out and not do these kind of things, that's absolutely fine. There's more than one way to contribute to it, but yeah, I mean, what I've learned since I've been doing this, especially through working with the amazing people of the Applied Improvisation Network, is that I've learned that what I was kind of doing subconsciously in those situations is playing with a thing called relative status, which is playing with your power behavior that you exhibit, whether when do you seem to be more powerful or less powerful, and how you can use both of those to lead. You can use low power to lead a group. Yeah. You can use high power to lead a group. You can match the power level of the group to get their sympathy, or you can contrast the power behavior to surprise them and get them to do things that they wouldn't otherwise do. So since doing that, I've kind of figured out much more about how it's actually working, which makes it much more difficult, of course, because it's like if you've never been taught, if you ride a bike, you can ride a bike. If someone explains to you what you're doing when you're riding the bike, you fall off. It's
Don't tell me
pointless.
how airplanes work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's such a that is such an important thing to realize that, I did some theater and some comedy, and and we were in the finals of this big thing competition here in the Netherlands, Leids Cabaret Festival, and this big thing, and because we were in the finals, we got a weekend with a professional teaching us about comedy on stage.
Oh,
and
boy.
actually, I didn't know anything because it was just spontaneous thing I did with a friend. So we had a duo act, and I have no clue. But the finals would be on this big stage in this, beautiful theater in Leiden, and so he taught us basically the rules, and we showed him our act, and he was like, "What? That makes no sense." And because my role was so all I did was I didn't know anything, and I didn't want to be there. And this friend of mine, he really wanted to be famous, and and I hated him actually, really. And I was like, Jesus, why am I here? That was my act. And he said, so he was teaching us about, but you have to use the whole stage, and you have to do blah, blah, blah. And it failed miserably because we were like, and all of a sudden, because the whole thing was genuine in the sense that I really didn't know what I was doing. And all of a sudden, yeah. And so teaching us how to do it properly.
Yeah. And that's very much true when I'm teaching people around facilitation. Sometimes you get very good natural facilitators and you think, do I touch this? Is it better just to leave it? What I try and do is give them like alternative tools rather than changing what they're doing, but say this is an option, think about this. And then they need to play with that. When they first try to use that, it's like years and years ago, Louis Armstrong, the trumpet player, his embouchement, the shape of his mouth on the trumpet was wrong, apparently. And he had to, he was always bleeding from the mouth. He's very famously always carried a white handkerchief with him because he's actually dabbing his mouth to soak up the blood while he's playing all the time. And he had to relearn his embouchement. He had to relearn the shape of his mouth on the trumpet. This is he's already a world-class trumpet player. Yeah. And that set him back, hugely. He had to sort of almost not do gigs and so on for a long time, or do very small gigs and so on, and relearn this. And once he'd got that, he could go further, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But that process is a very, very courageous one to do. I'm not good at this myself. I'm good at saying, okay, I can do this. Now don't touch it. I'm an actor and I also sing on stage. I do musicals. I've had no singing lessons in my life, and I'm quite scared of getting them because maybe I mess it up. Maybe it's like that airplane. Don't ask how it flies. Yeah, it's just
exactly.
It's just magic.
Exactly. I think so too. Yeah.
Folks do come to me and ask me for help, and I say, okay, here are some things with my colleagues. Of course, we show them stuff that they can do, and then we say, please do be aware that when you do this the first few times, you're going to feel weird.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of like little kids almost that are learning how to do something, right? Like they're learning how to help in the kitchen or something. And yeah, if you explain the whole process behind what they're doing, of course it's going to be, throw them a whole.
And this, I mean, you talked about change management in your background before as well. I know Aaron is very, very accomplished in this. But when organizations start doing things a new way, it's going to be worse at first.
Yeah.
It's just, it's kind of a no-brainer, and yet people expect, give us half a day training or do a quick hackathon and we've suddenly solved everything. No, this is a new way of behavior, and it's going to feel weird. And don't let go of your old stuff yet. You still need both, But here's a direction you can grow in.
It's funny. It's now I'm thinking about the airplane. That's actually it's just because we think it can fly, it flies. It's like the company. Don't touch it. Don't think about it because it's working.
Yeah.
Don't think about it too much. Don't look at it. Don't examine it because the whole thing will fall apart. And it is actually my experience that, and I just wrote this article about this, but about how I had all these odd jobs. When I was intended to be a student and doing all these odd jobs, wanted to be a musician and being in theater and an artist and what have you. Nothing worked out, but anyway. But I'm doing all these odd jobs. I always, after a few weeks, I thought, how is this company even, making money? Because it's such a mess. It is so messy, and no one talks to each other. It actually is so dysfunctional. It is so terribly dysfunctional. I learned the most from those odd jobs, really, to, on the factory floor, and, working with people who were just nobody ever listened to, and they knew that, and I didn't trust the people upstairs, et cetera, et cetera. That, I think that's sort of the, but that is sort of, in a way, being a bit, maybe a bit cynical in that sense, that's what companies are, and they survive because all the others are the same. They're also dysfunctional. So we work. That's basically why we make a living.
The more I have the curtain pulled back sometimes, the more I am absolutely amazed. Because in my mind, I have this idea of like, okay, to run a successful company or run a successful business, right? Like it has to operate one way, right? That's logical. That's how it is in the textbooks. And then I see these examples. I'm like, my gosh, I could be doing this. I mean, not really, but it's not as
yeah, but it is
I don't
people working together. It's people, emotional beings. It's the monkeys, I think so there's also beauty in it. It's just that we are taught that, or we think, when you start out, we have these these amazing smart people. They design these kind of organizations, and they're make millions of dollars and blah 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 blah, and it's great. And you go into a company, you're like, oh my god, it's a total emotional mess, right? People are scared, people are angry, people are irritated, and some people also, and they have fun too, by the way. They have fun, and it's great. It's all that, it's all of these emotions, and they pretend to be a business because they use the same logo, but it's just a bunch of people. It's a community of people working together, trying to kind of do something and make a living. And it's so interesting in a way, if you, as a zoologist, I guess. But if you look at, no, but seriously, I mean, if you look at it from that angle, right? You go like that. It's like, if you look at chimpanzees working together and doing stuff weird, aren't we? Exactly. Isn't just that the same thing? That
there's an awful lot in common, yeah. And I've been lucky enough to be at the top level of some be witnessed at the top level of some organizations, quite big organizations, and seen real, primeval chest thumping displays in the boardroom, where no one even asked what the facts were. It was just this opinion against that opinion, and people threatening to storm out and leaving and packing their stuff, and and you think, really, this is more like a soap opera than a huge organization, and this is how decisions are being made. And I think also it's important. There's another learning of zoology. Sometimes you can get it right by accident. Yeah, and then you get. We have the human phrase superstition about not walking under ladders and so on, but animals also have superstitions. They have behaviors which they believe are effective because they were lucky once, and then they keep doing those things. Yeah, and I think organizations do that as well. It's kind of the rain dance metaphor, that we do this thing and that makes it rain. If it wasn't rain, we did the dance badly. Yeah, not because it's the wrong thing to do, but because we messed it up this time. And you get these sort of self-propagating behaviors in organizations which are very, very interesting. And then you look at a similar organization who does it utterly differently and has a similar success. And you think, well, maybe there's more going on here.
There's a book called Fooled by Randomness. Right. And I think that's it, right? So you kind of and there's so also in the book there, it's it describes someone who deals in the stock market, for instance, and they're really successful, they're millionaires, and they think they know the trick.
Yeah.
They think they have it, and then they lose everything because actually it's just random. And it's this idea of, if you play Russian roulette with a million people, after a long, long time, someone will still be alive.
Yeah.
And that person starts to think,
yes.
they are, it's they're, what they're doing is the reason they're still alive, and it's not randomness, and they have some kind of godly kind of whatever power, and they will live forever, and they won't, because it's random. And it's this really fascinating thing, exactly what you're saying, that is, it's human nature. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not saying, I think it's really interesting. It's just that, how can you One thing we just don't do, and I think this is what, facilitators on a small or a large scale can do, or, you step back and you observe and you go like, huh, that's interesting. This is interesting. It's not like, oh my God. No, it's like really fascinating. It's interesting. What's happening here? Why is that, why is that person storming out, and interesting energy, the dynamics, but you'll be able to kind of observe that. And I think teaching people to be able to observe and kind of go on this, zoom out and go like, huh, right?
That's really critical to our practice. And two things here. That is literally how we teach people to facilitate. We have a cycle I developed with my colleague Renata Sögnerad and Anna Kura-Becks, where a thing happens, and the first thing we do is we try to say what happened, not on a non-interpretive level. Yeah. So we don't say that person got angry. We say, no. What did you see and hear? That person raised their voice. Okay. Yeah, that's observable, that they raised their voice. Angry is an interpretation. Yeah. And then we say, what else is like that? What else have you seen? And what can we do with this knowledge? So it's always an observe, a connect, if you like, and then a what to do next. Then we try something. It's like a design cycle, or a scientific cycle. You have observations. They give you data, and the data gives you hypotheses, and hypotheses give you the next design that you could try. And so that observation of what's going on is absolutely critical to facilitators. And the other thing is, there's no such thing as a silver bullet in facilitation, but this is the closest one there is to one, is simply stop and tell people what you're seeing. That is incredibly powerful. Whatever's happening, just say, okay, and do it in a non-judging, a non-evaluative way. Yeah, I'm noticing that this table have now filled out 15 templates. This table has done 12. This one has done 2. Just mentioning that. Yeah. Or that most teams are now on their 3rd template, and this team's on their 24th. Just to mention that to people, and then trust them to figure out what to do with that. When I hear words like that, it reminds me of hearing things like this. And just leave it like this. I mean, it's nonviolent communication techniques, basically. But it's incredibly, incredibly powerful just to state what you are seeing. And state in those terms, what I seem to see here. Yeah, not you're doing this and you're doing this, but what I see here is a situation where this is happening. And that's very powerful.
And I'm thinking of facilitation, of course, this is something that I work with a lot in my job. We all do. When you go into facilitation, how much of it would you say is improv and how much of it is directive? Because a lot of times they'll say, hey, Morgan, come and facilitate this. The objective by the end of the day is this. But it's not ever a straight line.
And yeah, it's very rarely a straight line, and often that objective will change. So one of the first things I do when I go into a room is to find out what the people in the room want to get out of the day. And if it's different from what their sponsor said, then okay, well, have a break. I'm going to make a phone call. Yeah. If there's a disconnect between what the room needs to do or wants to do and what their sponsor wants to do, that's a very important thing to establish straight away, and then decide with all those parties how you're going to handle that. Yeah, I think there's, again, this is a lot like design, isn't it? You have some kind of direction you want to head in, which might be around a certain result or a certain quality of what you're trying to achieve. Yeah. But you don't know what shape it's going to be until you get there. And often that's how the way facilitation works as well. I often have a plan for what's going to happen that day. Sometimes I have none at all. Literally, I just go in and say, well, okay, what's the story? But then you have to try stuff. I come from theater, so I do use surprise quite a lot, and I use speed quite a lot. In that case, it's helpful to have a plan, at least at the beginning, to sort of get people rolling into this. Arna talked about, figuring out I'm going to do this game anyway. And one of the reasons that we did that was went into it quite fast, but I haven't got time to think about it. That's classic action movie stuff, where you start with an action scene, like every James Bond film starts with an action scene, which is nothing to do with the story. It's just to get you engaged. And you can use that, but at some point you have to be checking, is this useful? Is this meaningful to the people? And if it's not, then it's just flash and thunder. It's pointless. But if it's got them to a place where they can now think in a different way or do things in a productive way, then it's great. And then, yeah, I think it was Eisenhower who said, plans are nothing, planning is everything. So you've had the plan or the experience of what you want to do here, and then you're very, very lightly letting go of it and doing something else. Which is
Yeah.
why it's very hard to work with things like massive pre-prepared Miro boards and things sometimes, because
Yes.
we don't need that now. We need something else.
Exactly. Yeah. Because exactly. Because one of the things that you don't want to do is, because if you have all your kind of methods and your tools kind of visible, and people are like, oh, we're going through the whole thing, and you're like, oh, I want to skip this one, but it's already there. Because so when I facilitate sessions, when people are working on a specific canvas, a specific tool, they don't see the other tool yet, but I do like to kind of start preparing it while they're working on the previous thing. They go like, oh, they're already, there's a next step. They know it's there and they're preparing it already. Okay, they're putting up this thing, and it's like, yeah, something's going to happen after this. So be really conscious of sort of because it's all language. It's all kind of you're showing people what you're putting them in a certain sort of context, sort of mood, sort of environment where you as a facilitator, what's coming next. And so they don't have to worry about it because you're preparing it. Is fine. So they can focus on what's in front of them and not having to worry about next, because you're okay. You have it all covered.
And to give them enough structure that they can orient themselves. We talk a lot about freedom within structure. Yeah. So what are the structures that I set up so that people do feel safe space? Yeah. It is easier to play football because of that white lines around the field. The old medieval forms of football that were across the countryside and thousands of people fighting for a ball. People got killed playing that. People got literally killed.
It's not very safe space.
You put a white line around the field and people can achieve amazing athletic stuff. Yeah, because they have that stop and start in 90 minutes. It's over and all these kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Sometimes though so one of the things that I ethically worry about is when I do trick people with my agendas, because I will put something on the agenda which seems relatively harmless, and then do something which, it is what I wrote there, but it's not what you expected. The best example is not even one of my facilitations. It was clients of mine. I helped out with this one, and they had all their top management together, 100, so 10 CEOs, 10 CFOs, 10 CMOs from the whole sort of global organization there. And one point on the agenda was like customer insights. So what did they expect? They expected more PowerPoint. They expected more numbers, maybe like a video, something like this. But no, what happened was the door opened and 48 customers walked in and sat down.
That's brilliant.
It's absolutely brilliant. And those top management, first they were shocked. They handled it really well. We had instructions to how to do a good interview and stuff like this. They interviewed them to learn stuff about what they were thinking. And for them, that was the highlight of the day, of course. Yeah. But also, if you put it on the agenda, meet the customer. I got a phone call. I'll be dropping out for a moment. You need to sometimes trick people to get them to a place they need to be. But is that ethical? Is another question.
Yeah, good question. I don't know. I've done these things. I did so much. It's fun. So
it's very fun. Yeah.
I'm in favor of tricking them to get them where they need to be.
Yeah, sure.
You weren't hired or called upon in that moment to say, give me a day that I expect. And you're brought in for a reason, right? You can do something that they cannot do on their own. And sometimes that means, letting them think it's just going to be another PowerPoint, and not by lying and saying, we're going to sit through another slide deck. But
well, this is where we get into the trust the process thing, right?
I hate that phrase.
I know it's horrible, but it is sort of this idea of what you really want people to not judge things before they do it, and judge it after they do it. So this is what I typically tell people, like, just go and do it, judge it after, not before, because otherwise you'll never know. So try it out and then hate it. That's fine, but usually when they go through it, they're like, and then it starts making sense. And it might, take a while, and sometimes even after the whatever session. But it's so you are always manipulating people in a way, because you're the one telling them, where to go and what to do and what to experience. But it's also experience of the facilitator. And this is why when you start out facilitating, haven't experienced that. You only see people going like, "What? No,
Mm, mm,
I'm not going to do that."
mm.
No, and so, but once you know, like, no, but wait, later, the penny will drop. You're like, now it makes sense. And so I think that's also part of being a facilitator. Again, you know what's going to happen, and because you're comfortable with that, but you also know that they're going through this rough time. So they will go through. I usually use a sort of a storytelling narrative for the design, in the sense that I don't always talk about it to the participants, but I was very inspired by Kurt Vonnegut's little video, which went viral, but he talks about man in hole.
Yeah.
So to me, it's like, everything's fine, it's okay, it starts out nice, it's good, and then you would fall down a hole, and then you climb out again, and then but you have a sort of another kind of because I remember at one time that became quite a thing as well, sort of a visualization of how the sort of the energy or the pattern of a session.
What the dramatic arcs, we call them, which is actually not what they are. So what you described from Vonnegut or something like the hero's journey is a dramatic arc which tracks the fortunes of somebody. That's what Macbeth aims too high and crashes down. So he goes up, becomes Thane of Cawdor of Glamis, becomes king, and then crashes down to becoming nothing. That's a true dramatic arc. But there's another word which in German is Spannungsbogen, or I guess it's very similar in Dutch. In French is courbe de tension, the curve of tension. And that shows the rhythm of engagement during an experience. So now I'm really, really focused. Now I'm kind of relaxed. I'm thrilled or I'm chill. Both of those are good. Thrill is good, chill is good. And there are patterns that feel right. This goes back to Aristotle, Freytag, people like this, but Aristotle 2,500 years ago writing about this and saying it's not the elements of a play that really matter. It's the sequence that they come in, and the rhythm of thrill and chill. Yeah, and some of these rhythms work and some of them don't. So the one I talked about is called boom, wow, 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 boom. Yeah, or things like this. Or actually it's boom, wow, 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 boom. Yeah. These are little story structures in terms of the tension. And they kind of overlay, if you like, the fortunes of the character in the story, which is what Vonnegut was talking about. Exactly. And it's really interesting because if you can like listen to music and you can hear this, you can hear this is up, this is down, this is up, this is down. You can watch any kind of movie and see it in there. You can see it in the structure of TV series. You can see it in religious services, all kinds of things. You see the same structures coming back again and again. And if we're talking about experiences being satisfying, part of that, of course, is the transactional thing. Yeah, I got my chewing gum that I wanted to buy. But also, if I want to make this special, what was the emotional journey that I went through doing that in terms of tension and relaxation, thrill and chill?
It's a rhythm that, and I really, and you're a musician, and I, which is such a magical thing, right? So you there's these kind of.
I'm a singer. I stand near musicians.
Are singers not musicians?
I don't consider myself one, no, but there certainly are some who are, but I'm not one.
Okay,
but thank you. I make music.
Well, that makes you.
Then you're a musician. Yes.
You're a musician, but a humble one. Okay. However, but sound and specifically music is a magical thing because it's this invisible, vibration that somehow in your brain kind of is translated into sort of some sounds or that it makes you feel something. And but I think there's also something about rhythm itself. So and I'm this is way too complicated and scientific for me, but I was reading an article about how everything really is rhythm in nature, in in our cell structures, in our everything is actually rhythm. And so we are very sensitive to rhythm and patterns, and we are pattern recognizers. But it has to do with these rhythms, and it's in everything. All our building blocks are basically the rhythm, and so I think there's some essence to that we recognize patterns and rhythms.
I think we certainly do, and you can see how there are these wonderful sort of things on the internet where they recut or they take the trailer of some movie and put different music underneath it, and suddenly it's a totally different movie. You know, there was
exactly. Yes.
there's the Benny Hillifier where you can put
Yeah.
the yakety sax music under any video and it becomes automatically hilarious. Or there's that one they had Count Dooku riding his rocket sled across whatever planet it was, and you could put epic music under there, comic music. You could put heavy metal under it just by clicking buttons, and the exactly the same scene felt so different.
That's why I cannot put music on this podcast at the start of the podcast. I have a little rhythm thingy, but I wanted to kind of have maybe some music or something when we're doing the intro. But it changes the whole tone, and like this is really serious, or this is really like, this is terrible, or this is like what you like, right? So Benny Hill, or
so
something.
I use music a lot in my facilitation, and people love it, especially online. It's one of the sort of what did you like type things. Always the music is the first one that gets mentioned because you can just do that with it. You know, I mean, if I'm asking people to, this is stuff I have the rights for, by the way, so it's okay. But if I have people thinking, is it a thinking like this? So guys, there's a button here. Is it thinking like this? Or is it thinking like this? Or thinking like this? Yeah, and you get a totally different mood in the workshop by the thing that you choose to play. You know,
exactly. Yes.
So that's a very useful device to use. Use it in physical situations, but especially online.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do also need to, because you know, there's so much to talk about, but I really do want to kind of talk about the Global Service Jam, because that's one of those things that people know you of, and you've been that was a huge thing when I started out, you know, the first few years in service design, and it also was part of, I at least to me, it was part of this sort of this movement that was starting, and it was so exciting, and there was all these new people, and it was a relatively small group of people, obviously, but it was a global family, and it felt like this family. And I, you know, I speak about it in past tense. I don't know that's not true, but it's for me at least, that I'm like, I really miss that. By the way, that global family feeling. But that was a huge thing, and it really, you know, if you talk about, by the way, if you talk about living labs and working, bringing people together, and but it's also it was so much work for you guys, and because that was part of the movement, that there's a little bit of the part that I've been missing a little bit is this: it's nonprofit. People were like, why are you doing there? It's not making them money. It makes no sense. Because nobody realized that actually it really, of course, it made your, you know, you made a name out of, you know, you created your kind of your positioning, and it was amazing. Not that was maybe that wasn't even the purpose, but just this idea of doing something without any direct financial goals, or which was at that time very, to me, new, which I really loved about that whole.
Maybe good for people who don't know what Global Service Jam is. You can.
Everyone will know this. Right?
Of course, everybody certainly knows this.
So since
tell Morgan, explain it to Morgan.
So I'm the idiot here. Yes,
since
please.
2011. On its basic form once a year, but there are other similar events that happen other times. Once a year, we set a date, and people sign up for that date to host a jam in their local city or online. They organize that however they want to. All that they get given from us is the time frame. It has to fit within these 48 hours. It can be shorter, but not longer than that. And they get a surprise theme. And then in these locations all around the world, they spend 48 hours on their local weekend jamming around this. So they're trying to look for problems suggested by the theme. They're trying to go out and talk to people, doing guerrilla research on the streets and so on to see if those problems are real. They start ideating and building prototypes, and they test them on the street again. So it's really very practical, a design doing kind of weekend. And they're doing it simultaneously all around the world. At the end of the the weekend they have to upload documentation of their prototypes. So it's a prototype focused thing. It's not a concept. It needs to be a prototype. You've got to build something. Yeah. And they're doing it simultaneously on the same theme all over the world. So the one that was due to happen in March of 2020, 150 cities taking part in this. So it's thousands of people. In 2019, it was 130 cities. We got hit hard by COVID. And this was a thing which took a lot of some money from us and a lot of work. We had some amazing volunteers helping us out with this, and we even burnt some of those I still feel bad about. But this was an amazing sort of movement, if you like, and I've met so many designers who said, I'm a designer because of the Global Service Jam. It was that safe space we talk about. You can come and try us for a couple of days, and using energy and fun to lift that, because while these people are doing this, they're connected. So they might be doing a video challenge for the guys in San Francisco, or a dance off with the guys in Sydney, or whatever it is, all around the world. A really, really fun thing. Since COVID, we were planning a big reboot of this in 2020, which then didn't happen because literally we got locked down 5 days before the jam. I had to tell people, nope, no more physical jams, online only. Lots of folks said, you can't do this stuff online. We learned you can, but it's different. And since then, we've been trying to pick it up again. But obviously, in our business, COVID also was a very important time. So we've not had the energy to put into it before. Yeah. So I think it's kind of ticking over now. We had 35, I think, last year. It's coming again quite soon, in about a month from now, to the end of February, beginning of March. globaljams.org. It's easy to sign up and organize it in a few days if you want to. And it's an amazing, amazing thing.
It is.
There are two quotes that stand out for me from my jam time. One, which I heard so many times, was, I did 5 weeks work in a weekend and I enjoyed it. Yeah. And I think the tension between those two things is really, really interesting. And the other one, which I think is really, really cool, is a French jammer said to me, so there was service design, there was design thinking, whatever you call it, in France before the jam. But after the jam, there was a design community in France. Yeah. And I think that's really, really cool. That's what it's for. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been extremely impactful, probably even more than you realize, because so many people, took part in this. And I so much believe in this sort of this, community, learning community kind of idea, because you don't feel alone. Sorry, you can't see this is a podcast. People can't see it now. I got balloons and I don't know why in my screen. But it's the that social evidence, that you feel that there are other people, and it's a global thing, and there's all these great, so you want to be part of that, you want to belong to that. So I think I think it had so much impact on the whole movement. So like I said, we're missing that. I think we need these things. We really need these things to come back, because I think the more people I talk to, especially people from the sort of the early community, they feel the same. Like they're we miss that but we still, it's not. Yes, we were busy and stuff happens, but still, it's we're there, and we want these things to be back. And the jam was one of those things that we're like, that's such a, it gave everything a flavor, an added flavor. There many things happen at the same time, but jam was one of those core things that was always there.
Yeah, it's still really great. Those who take part in it now, it's fewer people at the moment. We will hope it will come back again. Also as kind of people like, oldsters like you who come back and challenge themselves. They say, okay, I'm thinking this is a beginner's thing, but it's also a space where someone who's very experienced can say, can I do this faster or better or different? That kind of safe space idea. So I still encourage people to give it a try. It's a really, really fun thing to do. And someone said, a very smart Indian jammer said, jams can make innovation, but what they really make is they make innovators. It's an amazing crash course in the thing that we do, which gets you the feel of it, not just you can read all the articles and watch all the videos, and that's great, but you don't feel what it's like to innovate or to design until you've actually put something together with a group of people who don't all agree with you and been through that experience.
Yeah. Maybe we should do like a special episode where we go do the jam.
Yeah, it would be fun. It'd be fun.
Oh, yeah.
Fun to track some of those. What's really fun is that the early people, and by the way, Arnie, you were very generous when we were setting this up, so thank you for your support in those early years, especially. Some of the people who were the makers and shakers in the early days of the Jam, they're now makers and shakers of design. I mean, they are in huge roles. They are leading government design departments.
Exactly.
They are leading large organizations in this field. So it's really interesting to see also some of those connections have continued over this time as well. People who were doing a dance off between two countries, they're now working together in multi-million-dollar projects. Great. What a fantastic foundation for a relationship.
Exactly. Yeah. But that's how, again, so back to, how things actually work. It's these informal connections and these kind of the communities and the people that you meet. And, we're people working together. And you work with the people that you trust and you like. And so these kind of communities and connections and gives you this feeling of trust. And I think that's such a powerful thing to, I think that's where we should be heading anyway towards. So I think, and again, being sort of the facilitator of kind of these kind of jams or these kind of communities and these kind of, I think being that kind of, and so you're teaching people also through the jams as well, that it can be really powerful. So they can bring that into their organization. And I think, I don't know, but I hope that we're going to see more of that also within organizations. So I think we do,
That's where it started, actually. We were doing it in organizations first, then we started, let's make a global one. And it's a great, come and try this for a day, come and try it for 2 days and see what's useful. Just what you talked about with your asking people to suspend their criticism for a while and just give it a go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're getting to the end of the podcast, but so why did you move to Germany?
So this was early 90s, where Britain was a very inward-looking place.
Oh, really?
Yeah, very. The Thatcher years were by. Major was prime minister, who I think is a very decent person, but the country was very looking in on itself and didn't seem interested in the rest of the world. And I had this fabulous job that I was unhappy in, so I thought, okay, you need to change more than just your job, because that's a great job and you don't like it. Maybe it's you. And and I had a girlfriend in Germany and a wonderful family who offered me sort of a safety net. We didn't last long; we're still friends. But I moved over and I discovered a country. I'd barely been to Germany before. Just visiting her a few times, obviously, but hardly at all. And I found, this is why I say I'm an emotional German. I found a country which largely respects things like education and fact and so on, in a way which Britain at the time really didn't. There was a kind of a hooligan mentality. I know nothing and that's enough, which I've always found the least attractive thing about my home country, Britain. So I still have family in the UK, and I still love that landscape and that history, and I miss my fish and chips. But home is definitely the continent of Europe now.
Yeah. Well, you can't go back anymore anyway.
Well, no, that's
Brexit.
it.
So. Door closed.
It is more. I do have the two passports, but I got lucky with that one.
Yeah.
But if I had to give up one of them, it would certainly be the British one I'd give up.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Morgan, any last questions? Because I have a few, but I don't.
No, I don't have any last questions. I want to keep talking, but I also know that we have borders, white lines on the ground of this podcast.
Yeah. It usually takes way too long. Adam. So it's always good to talk to you. I think so. I'm really interested in that the sort of the overlap between theater, play, and the business world, basically, because I think there's there are blurred lines there, and it's so interesting, and I think I think everyone at school, actually, and also after school should be in theater, because I think that's there's one way to really learn about yourself and about others. And I remember you talk one day, you told me about one of the exercises that you had to kind of you kind of act out, and like you act as if you're another person. So you're with a bunch of people in the room, and you're going to be
you copy their body language.
You copy their body language. It's quite simple.
You copy the way they're sitting and the way they're holding their body and the way they walk around. It's incredibly insightful.
Exactly. Because it again, it's about seeing things differently, observing things, observing habits, but through that sort of, it's not a muscle, but it kind of, it's just, let's say that the training that muscle by seeing things, because what you said earlier about, you can stop, and say, hey, this is what I see. No judgment. This is what I see. That ability, once you get that, it opens up so many things, because it's like all of a sudden you start realizing how things are connected, and why certain things are happening, because you just go with the whatever the flow, or everybody's busy, we're not looking, and we're heads down, and just this idea of naming, even if it's just for yourself in your head, you're like, hey, this happened, that happened, that happened. And it sounds so simple, but it isn't. It's difficult because people don't do that. And
people always jump to an interpretation.
Yeah.
So we might do a thing like throw an invisible ball around, the thing that Anna mentioned, yeah. And I ask people, what did you see and hear? And they say, I saw collaboration. I say, no, you didn't. What did you see and hear? I saw happiness. No, you didn't. What did you see and hear? Oh, I saw people raising their chins. I saw their eyes opening wider.
Exactly.
I heard people's names being called. I heard laughter. Yeah, that stuff that you saw and you heard.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, because as a facilitator, that is where we have our fulcrum. So if I see that people who are engaged and so on are standing and moving around, if my people are here are not engaged, well, maybe standing and moving around is a good thing to do. Just to recreate that physicality often will take you a long way towards these things. Not always, of course, but to understand that people say, how do I make people engaged? You say, well, how are people when they are engaged? They do this, they do that, they do that. Well, do those things. And then see if that makes them engaged. Stop thinking in the abstraction and think in the practicality. What researchers call first level and second level concepts. The second level concept is they're in a hurry. The first level concept is they're moving fast. Yeah, so it's one is the objective truth, and one is the subjective interpretation. And as facilitators, we're trying to influence things like engagement or efficiency or whatever, collaboration. But those are abstract concepts. The way that you can actually touch those is by influencing the physicality, the words that are said or not said, the number of pens you hand out. Those are your levers that we use. And it's important to understand the distinction between what I can actually touch and influence and what I can't touch and influence.
But you can move in between, because you can say, for instance, I one thing I learned when I started facilitating is that if I felt something like low energy in the room or something, first of all, I could kind of see things happen, very practical, but also I felt something. The first thing, and when I started out, I thought it's my fault. I'm doing something wrong. But I also learned that when I would say that, I would say, hey, I feel there's low energy in the room. What's going on? Or do you feel the same? Is that, are you feeling that too? People go, oh, yeah. Oh, I thought it was just me. Or, yeah, because this or that. And sort of just saying whatever you think and would feel. Don't keep it to yourself. I would always, if I'm nervous, I would say I'm nervous, or if I'm confused, I'm confused, and I'll just say it. I'll say it. And then often people go, oh yeah, or if I don't understand something, people using a word, I don't want to be smart. I just want to go, I'll go like, I don't know what you mean. So what does that word mean? And then often they're like, oh, yeah, you actually, I think it means this. John? No. Oh, really? So you have these this ability of being sort of these antennas. I don't know if there's this thing that you've mean, it's inside of you, you're thinking it, you're feeling it, but you're not saying it. And so once you start saying it, all the other things are happening. People are like, oh yeah, oh really, oh yeah, it's true, me too. Oh, I thought it was me or something. So, but that's really, when I teach facilitators, that's the hardest thing. I mean, going through a journey map or, sure, fine. But that the ability of, I feel something and I'm going to share it with you, and I'm observing something and I'm going to say it, and I'm just going to, hey.
And what I think is critical about that is that I'm very, very adamant about this, is that as a facilitator, doing the work is not my job. Doing the work is the job of the people in the group. And to facilitate, I can set up the best possible context for them to do great work, but I'm not doing the work. They have to do the work, because they're the specialists and I'm not. And you have to be careful not to take away too much agency from people, so they start to think that you are doing the job. So part of this is contracting at the beginning, but it can be very, very simple. I've got a brilliant colleague in Hong Kong, Kate Okrasinski, and she, when she's talking to people and she sees skepsis in the room, what you might say is, I see you're skeptical. And what you've just done is you've just taken the role on yourself to prove something to them. She doesn't do that. She says, I see you have your thinking faces on. That's great. And that's left the responsibility with them, to do that thinking, to figure this out for themselves. I think that's a brilliant, subtle difference, to just say what you're observing in the room and then trust people to manage that, because they will. If you trust people, they will usually work it out.
But saying that is already a big step for
yes, absolutely.
Because most people will see it, they think, they get nervous, they think exactly, but they won't say it. And by saying that, or just showing that you've noticed that, you're seeing them, you're noticing them, you acknowledge them, it changes everything, because because they might not even be aware of their face, their expression, and they're like, oh, they notice, and they start thinking about, how do I relate? Why did I? Because they are communicating something, maybe not on purpose, but still they are. So anyway, that is such a, I think that's the essence, I think, of leadership, I think, and the facilitative leadership, but leadership as well, because you're leading, and that is what it is, and you're showing people, that you see them and that they're there, and then you're showing them options that they didn't even know they were there. And so this podcast obviously is kind of focusing, or we're thinking about and exploring what creative leadership is. And to me, creative leadership is, again, like we had Sarah on the other time. She's also one of those people like yourself, that you show people options that they didn't even know they were options. You're like, we can go here, and you're like, we can do that. Yeah. And it's the rubber chicken, for sure. But it's also, saying things that other people would not say, because, and all those things are little, but very impactful attitudes and behaviors, and that you're showing people. And I think that's a leadership role. So I really believe in that, great leaders are facilitators. And that, I think that might be the change that we're seeing. I hope that's the change that we're going to be seeing also in the future. What is your thinking about that? And sort of that's first.
I think that's very true. I mean, one there's a subtle difference maybe. If I am a facilitator who's come into a group from a different part of the company, or even external, like I often am, when I say what I'm seeing, I can be very, very neutral about that and say, I'm observing this. Because fundamentally, if they decide on that day not to do that work, but to have a fight instead, that's their decision. I will try to stop that happening. But if it happens, okay, that's now your problem. If I'm the leader of the group, it's not my problem, because the work didn't get done. I'm still going to have a tough debrief with the person who engaged me to get this. But if I encounter the situation where the group is not interested in doing that thing, I can report that back to the sponsor and say, that's what I found out. Yeah. But if I am the leader and the facilitator, that gets very difficult. And I think there is,
Yes.
there is a, how should I put this? It's very interesting to think about. So one of my great models for facilitation is a Brazilian theater maker called Augusto Boal, Boal. Google, very interesting person. Yeah, and they invented some of the methods which I now use in design. And they called the facilitator the Joker, which is interesting because you can change your rank. You can be powerful or very weak, whichever one is appropriate. You're not a diamond or a club or a heart. You're outside the suits. Yeah, this is interesting as well. And he also used the term that a facilitator can be a facilitator or a difficultator. So facilite to make easy, difficile to make difficult. And that's very interesting because sometimes as a leader, you're going to have to play that difficultator part quite a lot. You're going to have to say, perhaps not with these words, that's not good enough.
Yeah.
And this is a thing which facilitators all do, I hope. Yeah. But when I do it as an external facilitator, then I'm saying the behavior isn't good enough. This is not helping us, or the quality we're reaching is not good enough. But I'm not saying that about the output because I don't understand the output very often. They're producing a thing in the workshop. I know we did good work. It sounded like there were good conversations. I have to trust them that this thing is good enough to go to the board, for example. If I'm their manager, I might have to say, no, this is not good enough for the board. We have to go again. So that affects the range of options that I have because I can never say, I don't care. Because I've literally used that phrase in facilitation situations where the group was not collaborating, was to say, if we don't get this done today, I don't care. I get paid. If you want to make your private phone calls and do this and do that and have other discussions, that's fine. I'll get the coffee. We won't get any of these things done. You wanted to do today on our contract up here. It says you wanted to organize this and to clarify that and to fix the budget for this. We're not going to get any of those things done today, but that's your choice. I don't care. That's a very, very powerful thing to say because it shows the responsibility is in their court that they have to fix this.
Exactly.
And get this work done. That's really hard to do if I am the sponsor who needs to have those things done.
Yeah, I think this is the one. By the way, I think this is the big conversation I always have when I teach people facilitation within an organization. So they become facilitators. So basically, they're managers, they're team leaders, they're, what have you, and they need to facilitate their team. That's what they want. They want to be facilitators of their team. This is the thing exactly where you're talking about because they own the content.
Yes.
And they are also sometimes content experts. So they also have content to share. And can you then still be a facilitator? That's a question. So I always say, make that conscious choice what your position is. Maybe you need an outside facilitator. Maybe you need someone from another department or, someone maybe internal. Switch but make that conscious decision because it's going to change everything. Because exactly to your point, if you are the one that needs to kind of, carry that outcome further and, et cetera, and own that, your agenda is different. But you can still do it, but then also make that really explicit to everyone. Don't be vague about that. No. Just say, this is my position. This is what I am. And this is how I'm going to facilitate.
And that works at different levels as well, because as a leader, you are dealing maybe with that content, the output of the session. You're also developing the team as a team. You're developing individuals as individuals. Yeah. So you might have different roles, different balances of facilitator, difficultator, boss, friend, on those different tracks at the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I find.
I was going to say, I'm thinking of my role as a teacher, or then when I have one-off workshops that I drop into some festival or some, and I just do a one-off workshop. And the energy that I experience there is so different. And I could never understand because teaching is a lot of facilitation. But I think you've just hit the nail on the head because I have a stake in the owner. I'm also their leader in that moment with the students. And I think it really clarified, maybe why I handled the different situations also differently.
And this is the thing to negotiate with participants, to say, this is what I'd like to do. What do you need from me?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Again, explicit.
Explicit.
Whatever.
I write it down on a flip chart. I mean, really,
Exactly.
there's like a 2 flip chart contract that we make at the start of each session, and that stays by the coffee machine. And we say we can change it anytime, but we change it explicitly.
Yeah, making the implicit explicit.
Yeah.
I think, So there's one last thing I want to talk to you about, or just ask you. It's about, the future. Where are we going with this? Where is service design? Where is design, whatever name we give it? Where is this going? What do you see?
I mean, the boring answer is AI, but it is making a difference already. I mean, everyone talks about it. We've been experimenting with stuff around that. What interests me and my colleague Marcus, who co-founded the Jam, it was all his idea back in the day. We're very interested in the impact on teams of, the way I put it, is having non-human team members. So what does it do to human collaboration when there are non-human thinkers, if we can use that term, in the team? And we've been running some experiments around this. I think it's very, very interesting. I know this is the boring answer right now, but it is super interesting to think about that and how it changes things. Even today with our just at the beginning of 2024 AIs, there is already a difference to the way a team works, to the speed, to the thrill and the chill I talked about before. Because things are happening much faster. The generation of content, the generation of input is really, really quick. I've got colleagues who are now, rather than doing research, they are interviewing AIs. I'm not sure where that's useful and where it's not useful yet, but that changes the time that your team has to have conversations in the taxi between different interviews and sort of have thoughts emerge and to develop and serendipity to happen. So it will be interesting to see how that develops and how much I think is going to lead towards a box checking kind of work where things get done faster and we go through the steps very quickly, and which leaves less space for some of this human stuff to develop. And maybe that's good enough in many situations, and if it saves money and so on, that's a useful thing to do. And I think there will be a tension. Because that's generally not what people who enter this kind of career are interested in. They usually tend to be very interested in people and in whatever it's actually made of, creativity, and how will they feel about this becoming a more procedural kind of thing, a more checkbox kind of work where machines take over a lot of this lifting. And there's very simple things. Like,
I was going to ask, how do you also view the future of facilitation?
I would like to see facilitation being a much more universal skill. No, everybody says their own pet thing should be universal. Everybody should be a plumber if you ask a plumber. But
That'd be an interesting world, by the way. Yes.
Yeah. But I
Toilets
think
are perfect, but our taxes are a mess.
Exactly. I think there are things that we generally do not learn at school, in our educations and so on, or even in our workplaces, which are incredibly useful around collaboration and handling conflict and things like this. And sure, everybody could be a psychiatrist. That would be amazing, but that's not going to happen. There's a level of knowledge and skill that somebody can have with a bit of facilitation experience or training, which will let them get through life much easier and much better. And this doesn't mean you don't have to have that label on your chest that says, I am the facilitator. You can be a facilitative colleague. You can be a facilitative family member. Yeah. You can, rather than seeing yourself as in opposition or in alliance all the time to a certain person or group of people, you can say, let me help and stand beside this rather than stepping into everything. Some things I should step into. I should say, this is my thing. I care about this. But if I don't, maybe I can stand beside what's going on and help people along. Yeah. I mean, you see this when someone makes space in the conversation for someone who hasn't spoken up yet. That's facilitation. Yeah. Somebody who steps aside in a corridor to let somebody through. This is facilitation. And I think being more aware of this kind of stuff and maybe taking it to levels beyond that, being more active about these things, that would be very, very useful. I think as the machines do more and more things that humans have been doing, we need to get better at being humans.
Yep. That I want to end on that. Yes.
Thank you.
It's not getting any better than that. No, I totally agree. Yes, totally. Thank you. That's
you.
great. Thank you very much for being on this podcast.
Thanks for a great conversation. I hope some of it made sense.
Yeah.
I'll edit it out, but it makes sense.